Keeping up with our theme, 50 years after Biafra, healing, reconciliation, and reintegration. We've got two gentlemen in the studios here to give us their perspective on the subject matter. Mr. Tunji Shala is a former chairman of the People's Democratic Party in Lagos, but he's also a retired Navy captain. We also do have a retired Colonel Tony Nyam. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you.
Let me ask with you, sir. Let me start with you, sir. What kind of memories do you have of this war?
Well, I was young. I was about going to secondary school when the Civil War broke out. And a lot of things happened. In Lagos, where I lived, we saw, though the war was not directly taking place around us, but we could feel it. Helicopters would come in the night and bomb some areas. And some, I can remember vividly at the Bar Beach when an helicopter was brought down with mercenaries on board. It was a very remarkable thing for me to notice. And I had some of my classmates who joined us while I was in Form 4 who participated in the Civil War. Maybe they were much older, 4 years older, but we didn't see ourselves as strangers. We lived together. I lived among Igbos in Lagos. I lived in central Lagos, Isaleko area, close to the Oba's Palace. So there was no Igbo, Yoruba, Hausa. All of us lived together, especially the Igbos. They were always coming to trade with their monkey attached to the trucks and stuff like that. And we played together. They bring their goods and go back. But after the Civil War, we were thinking the reconciliation, rehabilitation, and reconstruction will make things work, but I don't think we have learned enough lessons so far. Nigeria seems to be a contraption because we don't seem to have commonality of language, culture, and tradition. Religion has now come to play a part too, apart from our culture, tradition, and so on. And we need to manage all these things properly so that Nigeria can be one. We need to guide what and what we say. Elders should know when to talk and when not to talk.
But why do you think that, that narrative of yours about us not having commonality of language is a barrier? Because there are several countries who don't have that as well, but they're forging ahead. Take, for instance, in Switzerland, they've got French, German, and then they also do have Italians. But things are going on well.
Well, those examples you've stated are not their own language. It's like we are speaking English here. We've even adopted Pidgin English, but education has not reached that stage where everybody can imbibe the spirit of using the language for cohesion. We need to be together to be able to appreciate this. Yeah. The Hausa is different from Yoruba, and it's different from Igbo. And we've brought sentiments into it that people now capitalize on where I come from. And when that one fails, they use religion. That's the pain of our problem.
Colonel, how did it resonate with you?
I was a young boy in Lagos, and I was on holidays when the killing started. Sorry, it started all in. I lived near the barracks in Yaba, near the barracks, and my father was an ex-soldier, so I was close to the army. And suddenly I saw killings going on in Lagos. when we was a young boy, because I remembered an officer was killed on the Kata Bridge, a well-known officer. And that was close to the barracks, Yaba, Abalti barracks and all that. And I saw that. Then my dad, who believed in Nigeria, in spite of us Easterners being asked to go not to go back to military school, my dad insisted I went back to Zaria. I think we were about 4 Easterners who went back. What I observed, we took the train. Usually we take the train from Ido. On Jebba Bridge, myself, I remembered an Udofia, Sergeant Udofia, and we were at the bridge, and with one of our mates called Ibrahim. And suddenly we saw troops came into the train, stopped the train on Jebba Bridge, searching, and then when they find any Igbo person or Easterner, they shoot and throw in the bridge. How was I saved, myself and Udofia, was that Ibrahim, who I see, one of my mates, came over and said to them that, oh, in this coach is all Ariwa boys going back to Zaria. That stayed in my mind. They shoot and threw. Then when I went back to Zaria in school, there were killings in the town. And we were lucky, we had a principal, that is General Ogundeko, who stood out and said there will be no killings in school. And he used his goodwill to ensure that Depot Zaria, that's why in 2 places there were no killings in the north. In the military was Zaria Depot. General Ogundeko, a gentleman from Ijebu-Mushi, who we all respect. And in fact, I remembered David Mark made a remark when we attended his burial, where that this man stood up that if any student will be killed, he has to be killed first, and ensured that there was no killing in Zaria. So I was there as a child, as a Form 1 boy. So Zaria, and the other thing also that interested me was the present Sultan of Sokoto, his father, Sir Abubakar Said, insisted that as a Muslim, there will be no killing in Sokoto. That's why Sokoto, there was no killing. And within the military in the north, Zaria, there were no killings. This thing stayed in my mind. First is that we had a sultan who came strongly that there should be no killing. That was why no Igbo was killed in Sokoto. And within the military in the north, no. So I give these unsung heroes, the late Sultan Abubakar and General T.Y., General Ogundeko, they were unsung heroes because he stood out and used his goodwill amongst the S-boys like General Haruna, other people to ensure that we were safe. So that stayed in my mind.
How is it that, we were not able to build on such narratives for people who actually stood up and ensured that things worked out well? So what were the challenges? Why do you think we were unable to build on this kind of stories?
I think the whole thing is to go to the point. There's no point in beating about the bush. We have a consistent internal colonizers who are remotely controlling the country. The whole play of Zogu's coup and the counter coup, and even General Gowon being the president, or being the head of state. General Gowon was the head of state, but he wasn't completely in control. The power, that's why when it was time to remove him, the power moved and removed him. So the internal colonizers who have been remotely controlling Nigeria are still at it.
Does that suggest that the people have never really been at the center of governance?
Which people?
Nigerians.
Nigerians have never been. I mean, a good example is a clear one in the Southwest. A people that were harassed security-wise, the people went through the process, the people called on their government that, look, we are being killed. The daughter of a prominent Yoruba man was killed. A prominent Yoruba man, Ulufalaye, was attacked twice. Everywhere in Yoruba land, between Ibadan and Ife, was unpassable. And the Yoruba people cried out. What? And luckily for Buhari, for this government, I would say General Buhari listened, sent his IG. They developed a conversation. The IG was involved in all the processes, and they came up with an initiative, which is called Amotekun. Amotekun, if you joke, I'm not a lawyer, but I have been able to look at the law. The Attorney General is basing his argument on item 17 of the first schedule of the Constitution, which is defense. But if you watch, the Southwest has never used defense. They had Southwest Security Network. Security is not in the exclusive list. Because if you go to the fundamental objectives of the Constitution, the directive principle, I think section 14 or whatever, it says security and welfare is the responsibility of government. It didn't say federal government.
Okay, well, that's a matter that is currently out there in contention.
It is interesting that when you opened, you talked about the 3 R's that the General Gowon also spoke about then. So we are still talking about the same thing now. Many people who have commented on those 3 R's have, inundated that maybe we didn't really follow up over time. What exactly was the problem with following through on those reconstruction initiatives?
First and foremost, I will blame it on leadership. Not as of today alone, from the past, but it has gone into a full-blown, unmanageable situation now.
Unmanageable?
Yes, because we have not been able to manage the crisis very well. Reconciliation means people should come together, agree, sort out problems, and move on. But you find out that as we are making progress in one area, there will be a setback. Part of what he mentioned, the Amotekun issue, is one of them. Amotekun is supposed to solve a problem. States have come together to determine what is good for them. 6 states in the Southwest. They realize that the number of policemen on ground are not enough to handle security matters in their various states. They met, as he rightly said, the IG was involved. And so we should move on from there. But suddenly, somebody said, it's not the best thing to happen. But as far as some of us are concerned, Amotekun has come to stay. It's the best thing that can happen to the security architecture in this country, because it's going to help to gather information, to gather intelligence, because the people are native to their local areas.
Okay. Again, as Chamberlain said, that's a trending issue. But, you know...
And I'm not trying to stop Amotekun.
No, but, you know, because it really is interesting. So the conversation we were having the other time about the leadership, issue that's truncated along the line, was it because there was no firm resolve of the government of the day to perpetrate it, or was it because it wasn't dissipated down through the other federating units? What exactly was it that made it to be truncated?
We have a constitution that we don't follow strictly.
As far back as the 70s?
Yes. And it's getting worse by the day. The constitution is there. The federal government made efforts to establish NYSC so that there will be cohesion, there will be cooperation, there will be relationship among youths and states. They established unity schools so that at least children from various parts of the country can assemble, gather together, understand each other. But we allow it to happen. Quota system was also introduced. Have we done it properly? We have 6 geopolitical zones. When we are sharing power, when we are sharing appointment, do we do it equitably as stated by the Constitution? This is where I said leadership is the problem.
You know, you talked about leadership. He also referenced leadership when he talked about the head of the school in Zaria, the academy in Zaria, and the Sultan of Sokoto at that time. But then earlier on, you mentioned that, you know, Nigeria has perhaps started as a contraption. And you know, at that point, there was no commonality of tradition, language, ethnicity, and what have you. But then some will say, if there's a commonality of vision for a country, I mean, everybody knows what we're meant to be as a country, where we should go to, then even those issues with, you know, religion, language will help us to achieve that vision. So do you think we have gotten that right, commonality of vision as a country?
Not at all. Like I was saying earlier, and I think there are parallels to be drawn here. The Civil War was caused by, after the Aburi Accord, the meeting which was to resolve when the Aburi Accord was reached, which was to restore Nigeria back to federalism after Aguiyi Ironsi had moved Nigeria to unitary. After the Aburi Accord, people got in touch, the power that be, to advise Dr. Tesmi Elias to prevail on him to advise General Gowon not to go by the agreement reached. We're having a repetition of it. Dr. Tesmi Elias was the Attorney General at that time. Today we have Malami coming to intervene in something like an Amotekun that has been built up. I'm suggesting that we've not learned the lesson that where a people are trying to, through dialogue, in a civilian way, build up a system like the Southwest has done, when someone comes, like the Attorney General is coming now, first of all, when you look at the Constitution, in the first I think the first chapter, it says the powers of the Federal Republic. There they list out the powers to do with law. It's not Attorney General, it's the National Assembly. It's well spelled out there. So where did the Attorney General, what authority has he got to come and say what he's saying? Because in the powers there, it talks of the National Assembly and the judiciary. So his advice cannot be mistaken to turn to become the federal. I think the president is listening and is watching, because really the Attorney General is going to give him a problem he cannot handle. And I think the president, being a commander-in-chief, and being a soldier, knows that security and defense are different. What Southwood is talking about is the security which is enshrined in fundamental human rights of a people, the protection of life. That's what Southwest is after.
So are you implying that this is perhaps not necessarily, and just to touch on that for a bit, not necessarily the opinion of the president concerning Amotekun?
I think the president, I would suggest, since he allowed his Attorney General, his IG to be in the process so far, why the afterthought? The president has intelligence. Intelligence would have informed in this discussion all along, because the president is well versed if you've been close to presidents. So for this afterthought, I think people are trying to use, like Tesmi Elias was advised, they are now using Malami. Remember, Malami said, let me study the thing. People are now putting pressure on Malami. And Malami came out and went too far because he has no powers.
Well, I remember you saying that you're not a lawyer, so, but he is a lawyer.
No,
but
can I say constitutional law? Let's not make mistakes.
I get your
constitutional
point.
Constitutional law is not only the prerogative of lawyers.
But
Without the mistake we made in Nigeria.
But the thing
everybody, this is the constitution.
I hear you.
It's very clear.
But the thing is, we can't prove, or you can't exactly say that people are using him.
Using
the Attorney General. We can't
No,
substantiate that.
No, I
because
can't substantiate that.
He's a lawyer, qualified,
But I can say that.
To that extent.
No, he has no authority.
Well, I don't know about...
No, the Constitution is clear.
Yeah, I'm only pointing out when you
Chapter
say that
1 of the
he's
Constitution...
being used. So if he's listening, he might feel it might impugn on his integrity because he's a qualified lawyer. So if whether he's being used or not, that's a different matter.
All right, I withdraw that. But I would say that he has no authority. He is not here.
Views...
The Constitution is here.
Opinions are free, that's fine.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. But, I mean, you were a Navy captain. I'm just wondering, because when you say that you blame some of these challenges on leadership, how we've not been able to maximize or come up stronger than we are, even though we have different backgrounds and culture and language. But sometimes behind the scenes, when you talk to people from different areas, you could hear opinion from the North, for instance, saying, well, if the South is asking for 1, 2, 3, 4, you have to consult properly in some of these things so that you don't, you agitate in a militaristic fashion. The same thing with the South. The South will say, look, the North, some of the views from the South will be that the North doesn't seem to subscribe or understand that point of view or perspective. So to that extent of those differences, do you think that it has to do with the kind of military leadership we've had over time? Has it unconsciously gotten the better of us such that when we push some of those issues, we seem to be militaristic in the way we approach it, rather than coming together, start dialogue, end dialogue, understand each other, and move forward?
Well, it's a very complex situation. Once you don't have the same orientation, the same background, the same thinking or line of thoughts, you can never get everything right. And that's why restructuring is necessary in this country. No matter how we try, if we don't restructure, we may not get anywhere. ISBA is in the north. In the northeast, you find JTF volunteers, civilian JTF. So why should somebody complain about Amotekun? And somebody turn a blind eye on what's going on as far as ISBA and the northeast, and now you are criticizing the southwest for coming together to form Amotekun. Let's see it this way. The first university in Nigeria was established in Ibadan, in the southwest, by Chief Obafemi Awolowo. It was his initiative. Thereafter, Nnamdi Azikiwe University came up. These are the examples we should copy from each other and not to pull ourselves back. If there is any area of friction, we can, like you rightly said, we can now come back together and resolve them. The first television station was established in Ibadan. Other television stations, NTA now came, and so many others. That's why we have channels, we have TVC, we have Arise, so many. So let there be competition among regions. Let there be competition among states.
Healthy competition, that is.
Healthy competition. And you can exchange ideas. We will always talk about this Amotekun. If Amotekun is allowed to thrive, definitely it will lead to a better security in the country.
All right, so...
Like we can see now, even the service chiefs are tired. They want to go.
They said, they told you?
They didn't tell me. I can feel it. Nothing is...
Okay.
Nothing has changed.
All
the
right.
security architecture has to change. And
Well,
so the
that's,
police too has to be...
So there you go. Unfortunately, you always hear what's topmost in their mindset. This Amotekun, it just won't go away, even though we're talking about armed forces. Incidentally, Armed Forces Remembrance Day also is to remember fallen soldiers, even in the Civil War.
Yes.
True.
As well. So we shouldn't forget that. Well, I want to thank you both for coming on this morning.
Thank you.
Colonel Tony Nyam, as well as Tunji Shala, former chairman of PDP in Lagos, and also former Navy captain.